This 4-year-old beggar girl sees a millionaire being used as bait by thieves on a deserted road. But what she does in seconds shocks everyone. Watch until the end. You won't regret it. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The suffocating July heat in West Virginia turned the asphalt into a shimmering mirage. But for Lily, just 4 years old, this wasn't just another hot day. Her bare feet trod cautiously on the red dirt of the road that cut through the outskirts of Harmony Creek, a small town that seemed to have stopped in time amidst the rolling green hills of the region. Beside her, Valerie walked with tired steps, her 28 years seeming much more under the weight of the poverty she carried on her stooped shoulders. The faded dress she wore had seen better days, as did the worn-out sneakers that barely protected her feet from the red dust that rose with each movement. "Mommy, when are we gonna get there?" Lily asked, her little voice hoarse with thirst, breaking the heavy silence of the afternoon. Valerie looked at her daughter and forced a smile that didn't reach her brown eyes, marked by sleepless nights and constant worries. "Soon, honey. We just need to get to town." 2 weeks ago, mother and daughter had arrived in this area after a distressing journey that brought them from rural Oklahoma. Now they lived in a makeshift shack near the town cemetery, built with old boards and plastic sheeting that offered little protection from the elements. What Lily didn't know was that her mother carried with her much more than just old clothes and shattered hopes. Hidden in a cloth bag that she never let go of were documents that could destroy the lives of many important people in her hometown. As they walked along the deserted road, the sound of an approaching engine made Valerie instinctively squeeze her daughter's hand. It was a habit she had developed since they fled. Any approach by strangers left her in a state of constant alert. Across the road, a black BMW slowed down near 3 men who gestured desperately beside an old car with the hood raised. The scene seemed perfectly normal. Travelers in distress asking for help from another driver on a lonely road. George Huntington, 52, was returning from a frustrating meeting in Charleston where he had tried to negotiate new contracts for his small, family-owned maple syrup business. His graying hair was disheveled after running his hand through it several times during the meeting, a nervous habit he had developed since losing his wife Carol 5 years ago. The businessman slowed down when he saw the men in distress. His kind nature, even shaken by the depression that consumed him daily, still led him to help those in need. He began to stop the car when a desperate shout cut through the stuffy afternoon air. "Don't stop! It's a lie!" The childish voice echoed with an urgency that made George's blood run cold. He glanced quickly at the side of the road and saw a little girl with disheveled brown hair pointing frantically at the 3 men. Her big, dark eyes shone with a disturbing intensity for such a small child. Something in Lily's expression, a mixture of terror and determination that seemed far beyond her 4 years, made George instinctively press the accelerator. In the rearview mirror, he saw the 3 men quickly abandon the charade and run towards a second vehicle hidden behind a bend. George's heart was pounding as he drove away from the trap. That child had just saved his life, perhaps more than that. Who were those men? What did they want with him? And above all, who was that girl who managed to perceive the danger when he himself had suspected nothing? Valerie pulled Lily behind a tree, trembling with fear. She had recognized something familiar in the way those men moved, in the calculated way they had set up the ambush. These were methods she knew all too well from her previous life. "Why did you shout, Lily?" Valerie whispered, hugging her daughter tightly. "They were gonna hurt the man in the nice car, Mommy." "I felt it," the girl replied with a simplicity that made Valerie shiver. In recent months, Lily had demonstrated a strange ability to feel the intentions of people. It was as if she could see through the masks that adults wore, perceiving truths that even they themselves didn't admit. Meanwhile, George stopped his car a few miles ahead, still trembling. He took out his cell phone to call the police, but hesitated. How would he explain what had happened? That a 4-year-old child had saved his life by shouting about an ambush that he hadn't even noticed. More importantly, he couldn't get the image of that girl out of his head. There was something about her that touched him deeply, a vulnerability mixed with an inexplicable strength. She was obviously in a state of misery, accompanied by a woman who seemed to be running from something. That night, in his empty and silent house, George couldn't sleep. For the first time in 5 years, his thoughts weren't focused only on the guilt he carried for Carol's departure. Now, a new obsession was beginning to take shape in his mind. He needed to find that child and find out who she was. What George didn't know was that his decision to look for Lily and Valerie would trigger a series of events that would put not only his own life at risk, but also reveal long-buried secrets that some people would do anything to keep hidden. 3 days had passed since the incident on the road, and George couldn't concentrate on anything else. Sitting in his office at the syrup factory, he stared blankly at the financial reports without really seeing them. His mind constantly returned to that desperate little voice that had echoed in the stifling afternoon. Huntington's Maple occupied a modest warehouse in the industrial district of Harmony Creek, where the aroma of cooked sugar and cinnamon mixed with the smell of damp earth that came from the hills. It was a small company, but one that had sustained 3 generations of the family with the production of traditional Appalachian treats. "George, are you listening to me?" The annoyed voice of his sister Bernice brought him back to reality. Bernice was standing in front of his desk, holding a folder with papers that looked urgent. At 47, she maintained an impeccable appearance that contrasted with the simplicity of the environment. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, and the grey suit she wore gave her an air of authority that she made a point of projecting. "Sorry, Bernice. What were you saying?" "The sales figures for this month, they're worrying," she said, placing the reports on the table more forcefully than necessary. "Maybe if you paid more attention to the business instead of daydreaming." George sighed. Since Carol's departure, Bernice had progressively taken on more responsibilities in the company, always with subtle comments about his inability to run the business alone. As the company's accountant, she controlled all the finances and had total access to the books. "You're right. It's just that something strange happened yesterday. Stranger than letting our family business go bankrupt." The coldness in Bernice's voice made George wince. He knew that his sister had always been ambitious, but in recent years her bitterness seemed to have intensified. She never married, never had children, and devoted all her energy to work and constant criticism of her brother's management. "It's not about the company. It's about a child." Bernice raised an eyebrow, her expression becoming even more impatient. "A child?" George hesitated. How could he explain what had happened without sounding completely crazy? "A girl helped me on the road. She and her mother seemed to be in trouble. I thought about maybe helping them." "George, you can't just go around picking up beggars off the street," Bernice said with disdain. "Especially children. People will think you've completely lost your mind. They're not beggars. They're people who need help. And since when is that our responsibility?" Bernice crossed her arms, her patience clearly exhausted. "You can barely take care of yourself, let alone strangers." At that moment, George made a decision that would change everything. He stood up from his chair with a determination he hadn't felt in years. "I'm going to look for them." "George, don't be ridiculous. You have a company to run." "The company can wait a few hours," he said, grabbing his car keys. "You take care of things here." Bernice watched him leave with an expression that mixed irritation and something darker. When she was alone in the office, her eyes fixed on the reports scattered on the table. Reports that she had carefully modified to show losses that didn't exist. 2 years ago, Bernice had begun to divert small amounts of money from the company to personal investments that had failed spectacularly. What began as temporary loans had become a financial hole of worrying proportions. She was counting on eventually inheriting the company to cover the embezzlements, but if George started to take an interest in other people, especially a child— "I can't let that happen," she murmured, picking up the phone. Meanwhile, George drove through the dusty streets of Harmony Creek, looking for signs of the woman and child he had seen on the road. He asked shopkeepers, residents, anyone who might have seen a young woman with a little girl. It was Mrs. Davis, the owner of a small diner on the outskirts of town, who gave him the first real clue. "Oh, you must be talking about the lady who arrived a few days ago with her little girl," said the grey-haired woman, drying a glass with a tattered cloth. "They're living in a shack near the cemetery. Poor things. Their situation is pretty tough." "How so tough?" "The woman, Valerie, I think her name is, seems to be running from something. Always looking over her shoulder, you know. And the girl, wow, what a special child. Her eyes see things that we can't even imagine." George felt his heart race. "Special how?" "Last week, she warned Mr. Johnson that his cow was going to have trouble calving. He didn't even believe a child so small, but in the end, he had to call the vet urgently. Saved the cow and the calf." With Mrs. Davis's directions, George drove to the outskirts of the municipal cemetery. What he saw shocked him. The shack was little more than a makeshift shelter, built with scraps of wood, plastic sheeting, and rusty zinc sheets. There was no proper door, just an old fabric hanging at the entrance. He stopped the car at a respectful distance and got out slowly, not wanting to scare whoever was inside. That's when he heard the child's voice. "Mommy, it's the man in the nice car. He came looking for us." Valerie appeared at the entrance to the shack, pulling Lily behind her in an instinctive protective gesture. Her brown eyes were alert, assessing any sign of danger in the well-dressed man who had appeared at their precarious refuge. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tense. George raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I want to thank you. Your daughter saved me from a very dangerous situation on the road." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Mommy," Lily stirred behind her mother's legs. "He's not going to hurt us. He's sad, but he's not bad." The girl's observation made George stop. How could a 4-year-old child perceive his sadness so easily? Valerie also seemed surprised by her daughter's words. "You're right," George said softly, addressing the child. "I am sad. But you helped me on the road, and now I want to help you." "We don't need help," Valerie said quickly, but her voice trembled slightly. George looked around the precarious shack, saw the torn clothes they were both wearing, the paleness that indicated malnutrition. Everyone needs help sometimes. There's no shame in that. It was then that Lily did something that changed everything. She broke away from her mother and walked up to George, looking directly into his eyes with an intensity that made him take a step back. "You lost someone very important," she said with her clear little voice. "A woman who loved you very much. She didn't want you to be sad forever." The silence that followed was total. George felt tears burning his eyes. How could that child know about Carol? How could she see through him so clearly? Valerie watched the scene with growing unease. Lily's perceptions always made her uncomfortable, but seeing the effect they had on that man scared her. How many people might want to exploit her daughter's strange gifts? "Lily, come here," she called, but the girl remained where she was. "He can help us, Mommy, and we can help him too." It was at that moment that George made a decision that would change all their lives forever. He knelt down to Lily's height and said softly, "Would you like to come and live in a real house?" George's question hung in the air like an impossible promise. Valerie looked at that man kneeling before her daughter, fighting against the hope that was beginning to sprout in her chest. It had been a long time since she trusted strangers, especially well-dressed men who appeared out of nowhere offering help. "Why would you do this for us?" she asked, her voice full of suspicion. George stood up slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Because your daughter saved me from something terrible, and because—" He hesitated, looking at Lily, who was watching him with those penetrating eyes. Because it's been a long time since I felt like I could make a difference in someone's life. Lily took her mother's hand, pulling it gently. Mommy, he's telling the truth. He doesn't want to hurt us. Valerie knelt down beside her daughter, studying her small, serious face. Lily's perceptions had saved them before. That's how they knew when they needed to leave Oklahoma in a hurry, when the girl started having nightmares about bad men looking for them. What if he changes his idea? Valerie murmured. What if he decides we're a problem? He won't, Lily said, with the absolute confidence that only children possess. He needs us as much as we need him. 3 hours later, George was driving through the streets of Harmony Creek with 2 passengers who were completely changing his solitary routine. Valerie remained tense in the passenger seat, watching his every move, while Lily hummed softly in the back seat, seemingly without any fear. George's house was on a quiet street in the center of town, a 2-story colonial building with white-painted walls and blue shutters. It had a garden in the front where roses grew that Carol had planted and that he kept alive out of pure stubbornness. "It's very pretty," Lily whispered when they got out of the car. "It belonged to my wife. She liked flowers," George said, a shadow passing over his face. Inside the house, the silence of the last 5 years was palpable. The furniture was covered in a thin layer of dust, despite the sporadic efforts of Mrs. Higgins, the lady who came to clean twice a week. It was a big house that had become a mausoleum of memories. "You can stay in the guest room," George said, walking up the stairs. "It has its own bathroom and—" He stopped at the door of the room, realizing for the first time in years how abandoned everything was. The curtains were closed, the bed unused for so long that the mattress had created a permanent depression. "Sorry, I don't get visitors often." Valerie watched the man who had taken them out of misery, beginning to understand that he lived in his own emotional prison. "Don't worry, we're used to little." While George tried to make the room habitable, Lily explored the house with the natural curiosity of children. That's how she found, in one of the rooms on the ground floor, a framed photograph of a smiling woman with brown hair and kind eyes. "She was very pretty," Lily said when George came down and found her looking at the photo. "She was. Carol was. She was everything to me." "Where is she now?" The simple question hit George like a punch. He knelt down beside Lily, fighting against the emotion that always came when he talked about Carol. "She's gone. A car accident 5 years ago." "She didn't want to leave," Lily said softly. "She wanted to stay with you." George looked at her, surprised once again by the girl's ability to perceive things that even he himself hadn't completely processed. "How do you know that?" "I feel it. She's still here in a way. She doesn't want you to be alone and sad." That night, for the first time in 5 years, George's house had life again. Valerie helped prepare dinner in the kitchen that had long only heated frozen food. Lily played on the living room floor, humming softly while drawing with crayons that George had bought hastily at the corner stationery store. But not everything was peaceful. On the other side of town, Bernice walked nervously through the factory office, calculating and recalculating the numbers she had manipulated. Her brother's absence throughout the afternoon had left her in a panic. What if he discovered the irregularities? What if he decided to audit the books? She picked up the phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "I need to talk to you," she said, when the call was answered. "It's about my brother. He's doing strange things." The voice on the other end of the line responded with renewed interest. It was exactly the kind of information he had been waiting for a long time. Back at George's house, Valerie finally began to relax for the first time in months. After Lily fell asleep in the guest room, she and George sat on the porch, watching the stars over the Appalachian Mountains. "Why were you on the road that day?" George asked gently. Valerie hesitated. "We were traveling. Running," he corrected softly. "You don't have to lie. I recognize someone who's running from something." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Valerie sighed. "My ex-husband. He got into trouble. Big trouble. And when I found out, I had to get out of there with Lily. What kind of trouble? The kind that can destroy a lot of innocent lives. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting years of accumulated fear. That's why I can't stay here very long. If he finds us, he won't find you, George said with a firmness that surprised them both. Not while I can stop it. Valerie studied him in the darkness of the porch. Why are you doing this? Even knowing the risks? George thought about the question for a long moment. Because 5 years ago, I couldn't protect the person I loved most in the world. Maybe this is my chance to do things right. And if you can't protect us either, then at least I'll have tried. 3 days passed, in a strange but comfortable routine. George returned from the factory every day to find Valerie organizing the house that hadn't received proper care for years, and Lily transforming every corner into a stage for her imaginary games. The girl demonstrated exceptional intelligence for her age, asking complex questions and making observations that constantly surprised the adults. But it was her ability to feel people that most impressed George. "The man at the market is lying about the prices," she said one morning when they returned from shopping. "How so, honey?" Valerie asked. "He charges more because Mr. Huntington has a nice car. He thinks we're rich." George and Valerie exchanged a look. It was exactly what had happened, but how could a 4-year-old child perceive these subtleties? It was on the Wednesday of the second week that everything changed. George arrived home early and found Lily playing alone in the backyard. "Where's your mom?" he asked. "Sleeping. She's very tired today." George went upstairs and knocked gently on the guest room door. When there was no answer, he carefully opened the door and found Valerie in bed, burning with fever. "Lily! Call Mrs. Higgins!" he shouted, running to the phone. Half an hour later, the town doctor examined Valerie while Lily held her mother's hand, her big eyes full of worry. "Pneumonia," diagnosed Dr. Miller. "It's in an advanced state. She needs to be hospitalized immediately." As the ambulance took Valerie to the regional hospital in Charleston, Lily clung to George tightly. "She's not going to leave us, is she?" she asked, her words echoing the deepest fears of a child who had already lost too much. "She won't," George promised, hugging her. "I won't let that happen." What he didn't know was that, at that very moment, a man was getting off a bus at the Harmony Creek bus station. A man who had received an anonymous call informing him about a woman with a small child who had appeared in town recently. A man who carried with him not only bad intentions, but also the key to secrets that Valerie had desperately guarded for months. The regional hospital in Charleston smelled of disinfectant and lost hope. George walked through the corridors with Lily asleep in his arms, for 3 days maintaining a constant vigil beside the bed where Valerie fought against the pneumonia that had settled in her lungs, weakened by malnutrition and stress. "Mr. Huntington," called Nurse Johnson, a short woman with grey hair who had become fond of the unlikely duo. "The doctor wants to speak with you." George carefully settled Lily in a chair in the waiting room and followed the nurse to the office. Dr. Ramirez, the pulmonologist responsible for the case, greeted him with a concerned expression. "How is she?" George asked, trying to decipher the doctor's expression. "Stable, but the recovery will be slow. Her body was very weakened when she arrived here. Chronic malnutrition, severe stress. How long have you been living in precarious conditions?" "I don't know for sure. I found them a few weeks ago." The doctor studied him curiously. "You're not a relative?" "No. They helped me, and now I want to return the favor." "I understand. Well, Miss Valerie will need to stay in the hospital for at least another week. What about the girl? Is there anyone to take care of her?" "Me," George replied without hesitation. "She stays with me." When he returned to the waiting room, he found Lily awake and attentively watching a man who was talking to the receptionist. He was an ordinary-looking man, about 40 years old, dark hair, simple clothes, but there was something in his posture that made George alert. "I'm looking for my wife and daughter," the man said with a worried voice. They disappeared a few months ago. The woman's name is Valerie, and the girl— "Daddy, no!" Lily suddenly shouted, running to hide behind George. The man turned quickly, and his eyes fixed on Lily with an intensity that made George's blood run cold. There was no love or relief in that look, only a cold and calculating possessiveness. "Lily, my daughter!" exclaimed the man, trying to approach. "Daddy's finally found you." "You're not my daddy!" Lily shouted, clinging to George's legs. "You're the bad man from my dreams." George positioned himself protectively in front of the girl. "Who are you?" "I'm Owen Sanders, Lily's father and Valerie's husband," the man said, taking documents out of his pocket. "I've been looking for them for months. My wife, she wasn't mentally well when she ran away with our daughter." "Liar!" Lily shouted. "He made Mommy cry. He's bad." The scene was attracting attention from other patients and hospital staff. George felt lost. Legally, he had no rights over Lily if that man really was her father. "Where's Valerie?" Owen asked, his eyes scanning the room. "She's sick," George replied cautiously. "I want to see her. Now." "No!" Lily began to cry desperately. "He can't see Mommy. He'll make her sad again." At that moment, Nurse Johnson approached the group. "What's all the commotion here?" Owen introduced himself again, showing the documents. "I'm the husband of the patient Valerie Sanders. I want to see my wife." The nurse took the documents, checked the name, and sighed. "I'll check if she can receive visitors. But the child can't go up now. She's too agitated." While the nurse went up to check, George knelt down beside Lily. "Tell me the truth. Is he really your father?" "He is," she whispered between sobs. "But he hurt Mommy. And there were bad men who came to our house and said mean things." "What kind of men?" "Men in suits who brought papers and made Mommy scared. Daddy Owen took money that wasn't his." George felt his stomach churn. The child was describing exactly the type of situation that Valerie had hinted at. Corruption, theft, real danger. 15 minutes later, Nurse Johnson came down with a disturbed expression. The patient went into crisis when she found out he was here. Her blood pressure skyrocketed. She had difficulty breathing. The doctor has forbidden any visits for today. "It's because she hasn't recovered from her mental confusion yet," Owen said quickly. "I understand. I'll come back tomorrow." After he left, George stood holding Lily, who was trembling like a leaf. "Is he going to take us away?" she asked. "I won't let that happen," George promised. But inside he was desperate. How could he stop a father from taking his biological daughter? That night, at home, Lily barely managed to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she woke up screaming about the bad man who came back. George spent the night beside her bed, feeling completely powerless. The next day, he decided to seek legal help. The lawyer, Mr. Finch, an elderly man he had known since childhood, received him in his office in downtown Harmony Creek. "The situation is complicated, George," the lawyer said after hearing the whole story. "If he has documents proving paternity and can get a medical certificate saying that the mother is incapacitated, but what if she's running away from him for good reason? You need proof. Without concrete evidence of abuse or crime, the justice system always favors the biological family." George left the office even more desperate. How would he get evidence against a man who obviously knew how to hide his tracks? The answer came from where he least expected it. That afternoon, when he returned to the hospital, he found Lily drawing on the paper that Nurse Johnson had given her. But these weren't ordinary children's drawings. They were detailed representations of faces, places, situations that a 4-year-old shouldn't be able to reproduce with such precision. "What is this, Lily?" "They're the bad men who used to come to our old house," she explained, pointing to different figures. "This one gave money to Daddy Owen, this other one brought papers, and this one—" She pointed to a particularly detailed drawing of a man with glasses and a moustache. "This one made Mommy cry because he said he would hurt us if she told secrets." George looked at the drawings with growing excitement. These weren't children's scribbles. They were portraits that could be used to identify real people. "Lily, do you remember where your mother kept the important papers?" "I remember. She always carried a bag that she never let go of. She said it had important things inside. Where is that bag now? In our little room. Under the new bed. George kissed the girl's forehead. You're very smart. Let's go home and get that bag. But when they arrived at the house, they found the front door open and clear signs that someone had ransacked the place. Furniture overturned, drawers open, papers scattered on the floor. He's been here, Lily whispered, grabbing George's hand. They ran to the guest room. The bed was overturned, the mattress thrown to the side. But under a loose floorboard, George found the canvas bag that Valerie never let go of. Inside it were dozens of documents, photographs and papers that looked very official. George didn't understand everything, but he recognized some important names from regional politics. And there was something else, a pen drive hidden in the lining of the bag. Now I understand why your mother was so scared, he murmured, flipping through the papers. Daddy Owen can't see these papers, Lily said seriously. If he sees them, the bad men will do terrible things. At that moment, they heard the sound of a car stopping in front of the house. George ran to the window and saw Owen getting out of a vehicle accompanied by two men who didn't exactly look friendly. They're back, Lily whispered, hiding behind George, and they brought the bad men. George grabbed the bag with the documents and picked up Lily. We're going out the back door, now. But when they got to the kitchen, they saw it was too late. One of Owen's men was blocking the back exit, and the sound of footsteps on the front porch indicated that the others were approaching the main door. They were surrounded. George's heart was pounding like a drum as he held Lily in the bag with the documents, desperately looking for a way out. The steps on the porch approached the main door, and the man in the back seemed to be testing the lock on the kitchen door. Mr. Huntington, Lily whispered in his ear, there's a hiding place in the room of the lady who used to live here. How do you know that? I see things sometimes. There's a little space behind the closet in the big room. With no time to question the girl's mysterious intuition, George silently climbed the stairs, carrying her along with the bag. The master bedroom, which was once his and Carol's, was exactly as he had left it 5 years ago, untouched by grief. Lily pointed to the old solid wood closet. Back there. George pushed the heavy furniture and discovered a small hidden door that led to a space between the walls, probably a hiding place built in colonial times. It was tight, but the two of them fit. At the exact moment they entered the hiding place, they heard the front door being violently opened. George Huntington, Owen's voice shouted, echoing through the house. I know you're in there. I just want my daughter back. Heavy footsteps roamed the ground floor, followed by the sound of furniture being overturned once again. Lily huddled against George, trembling silently. Search every room, ordered a different voice, rougher, with an accent that George couldn't identify. The documents have to be here. Boss, there are signs in this room that someone has been messing with it recently, shouted another man from upstairs. Then they were here a moment ago. They can't have gone far. George hugged Lily tighter, trying to muffle any sound. The girl put her mouth near his ear and whispered almost imperceptibly, They'll leave when it gets dark. The man with glasses is afraid of the dark. How could she know that? But George had learned to trust the child's strange perceptions. 2 hours passed like an eternity. The men ransacked every corner of the house, broke some furniture in frustration, but eventually gave up. The sound of the car driving away brought temporary relief. Can we come out now? Lily asked. Let's wait a little longer, George replied. To be sure. When they finally came out of the hiding place, the sun was setting behind the hills. The house was in a deplorable state. Drawers open, cushions torn, paintings thrown on the floor. But the most disturbing thing was the certainty that those men would return. We can't stay here, George said, grabbing some clothes and essentials. We're going to a hotel in Charleston near the hospital. What about Mommy? We'll take her with us as soon as she can leave. As he drove along the dark roads towards Charleston, George finally had time to better examine the documents that Valerie had saved. What he saw shocked him. Fraudulent public works contracts, bribery receipts, photographs of secret meetings. It was enough evidence to bring down half a dozen important politicians in the region. "Your mother was very brave to keep all this," he said to Lily. "She said that one day the bad men would pay for what they did, but she was very scared." At the hotel, after Lily fell asleep, George called Mr. Finch. "I need your help urgently. I have evidence of corruption that explains why Valerie ran away with her daughter." "Bring everything to my office early tomorrow morning," the lawyer replied. "And George, be very careful. If these people find out you have these documents—" The call was interrupted by insistent knocks on the room door. George felt his blood run cold. How had they found them so quickly? "Mr. Huntington," said a female voice from the other side of the door. "I'm from the hotel reception. There's an emergency about the patient Valerie Sanders." Something in the voice made him hesitate. Lily woke up and whispered, "It's not a real lady. It's one of the bad men pretending." George approached the window and saw 2 cars parked in the hotel parking lot. On the second floor, there was no easy way out. "Sir, please open the door," insisted the voice. "It's about your adopted daughter." The taunt was obvious. They knew exactly who he was and why he was there. "Lily, put on this coat quickly," he whispered, grabbing the girl's jacket. He opened the room window and looked down. There was a restaurant awning right below, and then a flower bed with bushes that could cushion a fall. "We're going to have to jump," he said to the girl. "I know," she replied calmly. "In my dreams, we always escape by jumping." George picked her up, and with the bag of documents over his shoulder, jumped out the window. The fall was softer than he expected, but he hurt his ankle when he landed. They ran to the car parked at the back of the hotel, while they heard shouts and movement coming from the room they had just abandoned. "Where to now?" George asked, starting the engine. "To Mrs. Bernice's house," Lily said suddenly. "What? Why my sister?" "Because she's helping the bad men, and she won't expect us to go there." George stopped the car on the side of the road. "How do you know my sister is involved?" "I saw her talking on the phone with Daddy Owen when we went to the factory the other day. She said she was going to help him prove that you're not fit to take care of a child." The revelation hit George like a lightning bolt. Bernice, his own sister, was working against him, helping those criminals. Everything made sense now. She knew about his routine, about where he lived, about his movements. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I tried, but you were too sad thinking about the wife who left. Adults don't listen to children when they're sad." George felt guilty and furious at the same time. While he was wallowing in self-pity, Lily had been trying to protect them from a betrayal he hadn't even imagined. "Then let's go to Bernice's house," he said, making a U-turn, "but not to hide. We're going to confront her." Bernice's house was in a gated community on the outskirts of Harmony Creek. When they arrived, they saw a light on in the living room and her car parked in the garage. "She's talking to someone," Lily said, pointing to the shadows moving behind the curtains. George parked on the street and approached the house silently. Through the crack in the window, he could see Bernice talking on the phone, gesturing nervously. "They escaped from the hotel," she was saying. "How could you lose them? It was a man with a child." Pause. "I don't care. Find them before they take those documents to the police. My life is also at risk here." Another pause. "Of course I know where they might have gone. There are only a few places where George would feel safe." George backed away from the window. His own sister was coordinating the hunt against them. The betrayal hurt more than any physical danger. "What are we going to do now?" Lily whispered. "We're going to put an end to this," George replied, determination replacing the fear in his voice. "But first, let's check on your mother." They drove back to Charleston, but this time avoiding the main roads. At the hospital, Nurse Johnson greeted them with relief. "I'm so glad you're back. Valerie woke up 2 hours ago and is asking about you. She said she had something very important to tell you." When they entered the room, Valerie was sitting in bed, still pale but with alert eyes. When she saw Lily, she began to cry with relief. My daughter. I thought he had taken you away. He almost did, Mommy. But Mr. Huntington protected me. Valerie looked at George with gratitude and something more, a determination he hadn't seen before. It's time to end this, she said. I have information that can put Owen and all his cronies in jail, but I need to do it the right way to make sure Lily is safe forever. The documents you saved, they're just part of the evidence. There's a lot more. Owen doesn't know it, but I recorded conversations, photographed meetings, saved everything for months before running away. She looked out the hospital window, where the dawn was beginning to break. But for this to work, you need to help me with something very dangerous. Valerie's plan was risky to the extreme. Sitting on the hospital bed, still weak from pneumonia, she explained every detail with a precision that revealed months of planning. Owen thinks I only saved some documents, she said, her voice hoarse but determined. He doesn't know that during the last year of our marriage, I documented everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every illegal transaction. Where's this evidence? George asked. In a safe deposit box in Oklahoma City. But to access it, I need to be there in person, and that means going back to the place we ran away from. Lily, who had been quiet in George's lap, raised her head. Mommy, in my dreams, when we go back to the old city, bad things happen. Valerie stroked her daughter's face. I know, honey, but sometimes we need to face the bad things so they stop chasing us. And how are we going to do this without Owen finding out? George questioned. He's going to find out. In fact, we're going to make sure he knows. Valerie got out of bed slowly, testing her strength. But when he finds out, it will be too late. The plan was complex and depended on perfect timing. Valerie would feign a relapse and be transferred to a hospital in Pittsburgh. During the transport, they would divert to Oklahoma City, retrieve the evidence from the safe deposit box, and deliver it simultaneously to the FBI and the press before Owen could react. What if something goes wrong? George asked. If something goes wrong, at least Lily will be with you, far away from all this dirt. No, the girl protested. I'm not going to let Mommy go alone. Honey, you need to be safe. I'm going too, Lily said with a surprising firmness for a 4-year-old child. If I don't go, the bad things will happen anyway. I need to be there to warn about the dangers. George looked at mother and daughter, realizing that both had inherited the same stubborn courage. Then let's all go together, like a family. The word family hung in the air of the hospital room like a promise and an oath. 2 days later, the plan was put into action. Valerie had a convincing relapse with a high fever and difficulty breathing that genuinely worried the doctors. The transfer to Pittsburgh was authorized with urgency. George drove the private ambulance he had rented, disguised in a paramedic uniform they had obtained through Mr. Finch. Valerie was on the stretcher, connected to real equipment that monitored her vital signs. Lily traveled hidden in a special compartment that George had improvised. The first part of the trip went without a hitch. But when they reached the border between West Virginia and Oklahoma, Lily whispered, "There are cars following us." George looked in the rearview mirror and saw 2 vehicles keeping a constant distance behind them. Owen had discovered the plan earlier than they expected. How far to Oklahoma City? Valerie asked. 2 hours. They won't try anything on the main road. Too risky. They'll wait until we get to the city. But Lily shook her head. No, Mommy. They're going to try to stop us before. The man with glasses said that in the city there are too many people who can see. As if confirming the girl's prediction, one of the cars accelerated and began to approach dangerously. George floored the accelerator, but the ambulance didn't have the agility of a regular car. There's a gas station ahead, Valerie shouted, full of people. They won't try anything there. George entered the station at high speed, stopping abruptly near the pumps. The cars following them passed straight through, but he knew they would be back. We need help, he said to the gas station attendant, a young man who was looking at him curiously. What kind of help? Call the state troopers. We're being followed. But before the boy could react, the two cars returned and parked at the entrances of the station, blocking any exit. 5 men got out, trying to look casual, but clearly positioned strategically. Owen approached the ambulance with a fake smile. "George, what a coincidence to find you here." "It's no coincidence at all." "Of course not. You took something that belongs to me." His eyes fixed on the ambulance where he knew Valerie was. "My family? Your family ran away from you for a reason." Owen laughed, but there was no humor in his eyes. "My wife was confused, influenced by people who filled her head with lies about me." At that moment, Lily appeared at the door of the ambulance. "You're not my real daddy," she said, her voice small but firm. "Real daddies don't make the people they love scared." "Lily, come here now," Owen ordered, reaching out his hand. "No." The child's simple and direct refusal seemed to shock Owen more than any adult argument. His face twisted with anger. "This girl needs to learn to obey," he said, starting to head towards the ambulance. It was then that George noticed that other cars had arrived at the station, but this time they were state trooper vehicles. "Everyone freeze!" shouted a trooper, jumping out of the car with his gun drawn. Owen stopped, confused. "What's going on?" "We're a family trying to resolve a misunderstanding." "Owen Sanders?" asked the sheriff, who was commanding the operation. "Yes, it's me." "You're under arrest for racketeering, active and passive corruption, and money laundering." Owen's face paled. "This is a mistake. I have nothing to do with—" "We have an arrest warrant issued 2 hours ago, based on evidence presented by the FBI from Oklahoma." George and Valerie looked at each other, confused. How could there be evidence if they hadn't even gotten to the safe deposit box yet? The answer came from an unexpected source. Mr. Finch got out of one of the police cars, carrying a bulky folder. "The evidence you saved," he said, approaching the ambulance, "wasn't the only evidence. Other business owners and public officials that Owen tried to corrupt were also documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to act." "How did you find out about our plan?" George asked. "Bernice. She contacted the police last night." "Bernice?" Valerie sat up on the stretcher, surprised. "She realized she was being used by Owen. When he threatened to harm you physically if she didn't cooperate, she got scared and decided to collaborate with the justice system." Lily watched the officers leading Owen and his cronies away in handcuffs. "Will the bad men be gone forever?" she asked. "Forever," guaranteed the sheriff. "We have enough evidence to convict them for many years." But the tranquility was short-lived. When they returned to Harmony Creek 2 days later, they discovered that George's factory had caught fire during the night. The fire department managed to control the blaze, but the building was partially destroyed. "Was it accidental?" George asked the fire chief. "Hard to say, but we found traces of accelerant in some places. Someone wanted this building to burn completely." Bernice was waiting for them in the wreckage of the factory, crying. When she saw George, she ran to hug him. "Forgive me, brother. Forgive me for everything. I didn't know they were going to do this." "Who did this, Bernice?" "Some men who worked with Owen. They said that if the factory was destroyed, you would no longer have any reason to stay in town. They thought you would leave and take the evidence with you." George looked at the ruins of 3 generations of Huntington family labor. Melted machines, centuries-old recipes lost, memories turned to ashes. "What are we going to do now?" Valerie asked, holding Lily. Lily broke away from her mother and walked among the rubble. She stopped in a specific corner and began to dig in the dirt with her little hands. "Lily, don't touch that!" George shouted, worried about possible dangers. But the girl continued digging until she found a metal box buried under a fallen beam. Inside the box were old papers, handwritten recipes, and some jewels that looked very valuable. "How did you know this was here?" Bernice asked, astonished. "The lady who used to live in Mr. Huntington's house told me in my dreams," Lily replied naturally. "She said that when bad things happened, I would find what I needed to start over." George picked up the papers. and immediately recognized his grandfather's handwriting, the original recipes for Huntington's maple treats, including some that the family had lost decades ago. That night, sitting on the porch of the house that was now definitely theirs, George, Valerie, and Lily planned the future. The factory would be rebuilt, smaller but more modern. Bernice had offered to use her personal savings to help with the reconstruction, in an attempt to repair her mistakes. "Is everything going to be okay?" Lily asked, nestled between the two adults. "Yes," George replied. "We're going to build something new, better. And we're going to do it together," Valerie added. But what none of them knew was that the problems were far from over. In a neighboring town, a man read the news about Owen's arrest with growing interest. He had worked with Owen on other schemes, and now he needed to make sure that certain information never came to light. Information that could be in the memory of a very clever 4-year-old child. 3 weeks had passed since the factory fire, and life in Harmony Creek seemed to have found a new rhythm. George dedicated his mornings to rebuilding the business, working with architects and engineers to design a new factory. Valerie, completely recovered from pneumonia, discovered a natural talent for confectionery that impressed even the most experienced candy makers in the region. "I've never seen anyone understand the sugar point so quickly," commented Mr. Peterson, a retired master confectioner whom George had convinced to come out of retirement to help with the reconstruction. "It seems like she was born knowing the secrets of candy making." Lily, in turn, had become the unofficial mascot of the project. Her ability to feel when something was wrong proved useful in unexpected ways. She always knew when a recipe wasn't working or when a supplier wasn't trustworthy. But on the afternoon of a sweltering January Thursday, the peace was broken by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Cesar Bradford was a 55-year-old man, elegantly dressed, with perfectly combed grey hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. He introduced himself as a representative of a group of investors interested in opportunities in rural West Virginia. "I heard that you are rebuilding the candy factory," he said, sitting in George's living room with a leather folder on his lap. "My clients were very interested in participating in this venture." "We're not looking for investors," George replied politely. "We intend to keep the business family-owned." "Oh, but I'm sure I can make you change your mind." Cesar opened the folder and took out some photographs, "especially considering the delicate situation of your family." The photographs showed Valerie and Lily shopping at the market, playing in the backyard, walking through the streets of town. All taken from afar with professional equipment. George felt his blood run cold. "What do you want?" "As I said, we want to invest in the business. 51% ownership in exchange for a generous investment that will guarantee the company's success." "And if I refuse?" Cesar smiled, but the smile was a thinly veiled threat. "It would be very unwise, especially with a small child in the family. Accidents happen, Mr. Huntington, especially with children who, how can I say, know too much." At that moment, Lily appeared in the room, returning from the kitchen where she was helping Valerie prepare sweets. She looked at Cesar and stopped immediately, her eyes widening. "George," she said with her small but firm voice, "this man didn't come to talk about candy. He came because of Daddy Owen's secrets." Cesar got up abruptly, clearly disturbed by the child's direct observation. "What an interesting girl. Very perceptive for her age. Too perceptive for her own safety," he added, addressing George but without taking his eyes off Lily. "Get out of my house." "Now," George said, standing up and positioning himself protectively in front of Lily. Of course, but think about my proposal. You have 48 hours to decide." Cesar put the photographs back in the folder. "And remember, this is a small town. There aren't many places to hide." After he left, Lily clung to George's leg, trembling. "He wants to take me away," she whispered. "Why would he do that?" "Because I saw his face in Mommy's papers. He was at the meetings with Daddy Owen. He's afraid I'll remember important things." Valerie appeared in the room, drying her hands on her apron. Who was that man? Lily ran out of the kitchen as if she had seen a ghost. George told her about Caesar's visit, the veiled threats, and the forced partnership proposal. Valerie paled progressively as she listened. "He's right," she said when George finished. "Lily can identify him. During the last months before we ran away, Owen received many men at home. Some I recognized, others I didn't. But Lily was always around, listening, watching. And you think she can remember things that would compromise this Caesar?" "I'm sure. Her memory is impressive for a child her age." That night, after Lily fell asleep, George and Valerie discussed their options. Running away again was out of the question. They had built a life in Harmony Creek and didn't intend to abandon everything again. But confronting Caesar directly seemed too dangerous. "There's something I didn't tell you about the documents I saved," Valerie said. "They're not just about local corruption. Owen was involved in a much larger network, which included people from other states. Is Caesar part of that network? Probably. And if he's here, it means that the other members of the network got nervous about Owen's arrest." The next morning, Bernice arrived at George's house visibly agitated. "My brother, we received a purchase offer for the factory. Someone offered 3 times the market value for the land and the brand rights. Let me guess, a group of investors represented by a man named Caesar Bradford. How did you know?" "He was here yesterday, making threats." Bernice sat heavily in a chair. "George, I need to tell you something. Last night, someone broke into my apartment. They didn't take anything, but they messed with all my papers, especially the documents related to the company. They're mapping our assets," Valerie concluded. "They want to know exactly what we have, to know how much they need to pay or how much they need to threaten." Lily, who was playing quietly in the corner of the room, raised her head. "They also went to Aunt Bernice's house because they think she saved things from Daddy Owen." "What things?" Bernice asked. "Papers that the bad man left in the factory office before the fire. He hid them in a secret drawer." Everyone looked at the girl. "What secret drawer?" George asked. "The big desk in your office had a hidden place. The man in the dark suit put an envelope there the night before the fire." George and Bernice exchanged glances. If there were documents hidden in the office desk, and if the desk had survived the fire. "Let's check it out," George said, standing up. On the land where the factory used to be, the rubble was still being removed slowly. George's office desk had survived, protected by a beam that fell at an angle and created a protective pocket. Guided by Lily's precise instructions, George found a secret mechanism on the side of the desk. Inside the compartment was a sealed envelope containing documents and photographs. "My God!" murmured Valerie, examining the contents. "They're records of international bank transactions. Money laundering on an industrial scale. And look at this," said Bernice, pointing to one of the photographs. "Caesar Bradford meeting with politicians from Washington." Lily looked at the photographs and pointed to different people. "This man visited our old house, this other one too, and this woman spoke on the phone with Daddy Owen every week." Lily can identify 6 people in this network, George realized. "That's why Caesar wants to control her, or silence her," Valerie added somberly. At that moment they heard the sound of cars approaching. Caesar Bradford had returned, but this time he wasn't alone. 3 men accompanied him, and they all had the appearance of someone who was used to solving problems definitively. 48 hours haven't passed yet," George shouted. "The deadlines have changed," Caesar replied, approaching. "We know that you found something that belongs to us." "We don't know what you're talking about." Caesar laughed. "Of course you do. And now you're going to give us everything. The documents, the photographs, and—" He looked directly at Lily. "You're going to allow us a private conversation with the girl." "Never," said Valerie, hugging her daughter. "I'm not asking for permission," Caesar replied, signaling his men. It was then that Lily did something that surprised everyone. She ran towards the main road, screaming with all the strength in her lungs, "Help! Bad men, help!" Her childish voice echoed through the silent afternoon, and in a few minutes, curious residents began to appear nearby. Caesar and his men got nervous about the unwanted attention. "This isn't over," Caesar said, backing away to the car. "You can't keep an eye on her 24 hours a day." After they left, George hugged Lily. "You were very brave, but very dangerous too. Bad men don't like it when a lot of people are watching," she explained simply. That night, while they kept watch at the house, George made a decision that would change everything again. "We're going to end this once and for all. We're going to use what we know to destroy this network before they destroy our family." "How?" Valerie asked. "The same way you destroyed Owen. Evidence, press, and authorities. Only this time, we're going to do everything at the same time without giving them time to react." "What if we can't?" George looked at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully on the couch between them, completely trusting in the protection of the adults she loved. "Then at least we're going to make them pay a high price for trying to hurt our family." George's plan required precise coordination that would test the limits of courage of everyone involved. During the next 3 days, the house was transformed into a makeshift operations center. Mr. Finch had brought 2 investigative journalists from Pittsburgh, while Bernice used her contacts in accounting to track suspicious financial movements. "We need more than documents," explained Sarah Miller, one of the journalists. "We need credible witnesses and evidence that shows the operation in action. Lily can identify people, but we can't expose a child to that kind of situation," Valerie protested. "Not directly," George agreed, "but she can help us in other ways." It was then that Lily surprised everyone once again. "I can draw," she said simply. "I can draw all the faces I remember, all the places where I saw them meeting." "A 4-year-old doing forensic sketches?" questioned the other journalist, Carlos Mendonça. "Would that even be admissible as evidence?" "If the drawings lead to identifications confirmed by other sources, yes," Dr. Finch replied. "And considering the accuracy Lily has demonstrated so far." Over the next few hours, Lily dedicated herself to a task that seemed impossible for her age. With crayons and paper, she reproduced with impressive detail the faces of more than a dozen people she had seen at the clandestine meetings in her old house. "This man always carried a black briefcase and spoke softly," she explained as she drew. "This other one had a scar on his forehead and smelled strongly of cigarettes." Each drawing was accompanied by details that only someone who had been present could know. Specific clothes, characteristic gestures, even conversations she had overheard. "It's impossible for a child to invent so many consistent details," Sarah murmured, photographing each drawing. "This is pure gold for our investigation." But on the afternoon of the second day, their plans were interrupted by an alarming discovery. Bernice arrived home visibly shaken, holding a letter she had found under the door of her apartment. "They know about our investigation," she said, handing the letter to George. The message was direct and terrifying. "Stop playing detective, or the girl will disappear forever." "Last chance. How did they find out so fast?" Valerie asked, hugging Lily protectively. The answer came from an unexpected source. George's phone rang, and the voice of César Brandon sounded from the other end of the line with a disturbing confidence. "Mr. Huntington, this town is smaller than you imagine, and we have far more resources than we appear to. What do you want?" "A meeting. Tonight at the town cemetery. Come alone, or we'll start eliminating people you love." "Starting with the child." The call ended abruptly, leaving everyone in a state of shock. "It's an obvious trap," said Carlos. "He wants you isolated." "Of course it's a trap," George agreed. "But what if we don't go? What if they really do something to Lily?" "They won't succeed," the girl said with her childlike confidence, "because I know where they'll try to take me." Everyone turned to her. "What do you mean?" Valerie asked. "In my dreams, I always see the same place. An old house with broken windows near the place where people who are gone forever sleep." "The cemetery," Bernice murmured. "There's an abandoned house next to the cemetery. It belonged to the old gravedigger, abandoned years ago. They'll try to take me there during the meeting with Uncle George, Lily continued, but they won't succeed because you'll be waiting. Sarah looked at the child with growing admiration. You're suggesting we use you as bait. It's not bait if we know where the fish are, Lily replied, with disconcerting logic. The plan that emerged was risky, but ingenious. George would go to the meeting at the cemetery, but not alone. The journalists would be hidden with filming equipment. Valerie and Bernice would stay in the abandoned house with 2 police officers that Mr. Finch had managed to convince to help discreetly. What if something goes wrong? Valerie worried. Then at least we'll have recorded evidence of what they're capable of doing, George responded grimly. At 10 o'clock that night, Harmony Creek Cemetery was shrouded in a darkness that seemed denser than usual. George walked among the old tombstones, feeling invisible eyes watching him from the shadows. César waited for him near the mausoleum of the town's founding family, accompanied by 3 men who clearly weren't there for a civilized conversation. Punctual. I admire that in a businessman, César said, his voice echoing among the old stones. Let's get straight to the point. What exactly do you want? We want you to disappear from the town, you, the woman, and especially the child, and we want all the documents you found. And if I refuse, César signaled to one of his men, who held up a photograph. Even in the darkness, George could distinguish that it was an image of Lily playing in the backyard, taken with a long lens. You have 24 hours to leave town, César continued. If you stay, the girl will have a very sad accident. You're monsters. We're pragmatic. A child is worth far less than a multi-million-dollar business. At that moment, screams echoed from the direction of the abandoned house. César smiled with satisfaction. Ah, it seems our colleagues have found your family. George turned to run, but one of the men grabbed him. No hurry. You're going to watch everything. But the screams coming from the abandoned house weren't from Valerie or Lily. They were from César's own men, who had fallen into a carefully prepared trap. What the hell is going on? César growled, picking up a radio. The answer came in the form of powerful lights that turned on around the cemetery. Armed police officers emerged from the shadows surrounding the group. César Brandome, you're under arrest for threats, attempted extortion and racketeering, shouted the officer in charge of the operation. César looked around, trying to understand how he had fallen into an ambush. This is impossible. We control everything here. Used to control, a familiar voice corrected. Owen emerged from the shadows, handcuffed but clearly cooperating with the police. I decided it was time to tell everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. You betrayed the entire operation, César said, incredulous. Just like you betrayed our family, Lily replied, appearing next to the officer. Uncle Peterson told the police where you would be. The revelation that Owen had turned against his former partners caught César completely by surprise. In the days leading up to this moment, while George and his family planned their strategy, Owen had reached an agreement with the authorities. In exchange for full cooperation and revealing the entire network, he would receive a significant reduction in his sentence. How did you know I would be here? César asked as he was handcuffed. Because I dreamed about it, Lily replied simply. And my dreams always show the truth. In the following hours, the police operation dismantled a network of corruption that extended across 3 states. The documents found on George's desk, combined with the evidence Owen provided and the testimonies based on Lily's drawings, resulted in the arrest of 17 people. But the victory came at an unexpected cost. The next morning, George received a call that would change everything again. Mr. Huntington, the official voice on the other end of the line said, this is the U.S. Attorney's Office. We need to speak with you urgently about the girl, Lily. What's wrong with her? Her unique abilities have attracted the attention of important people. There are those who believe she should be studied to better understand how she manages to do what she does. Studied how? In a controlled environment, by specialists. For the good of science and national security. George felt the world spin around him. They had defeated a criminal network, only to discover that now the government itself wanted to turn Lily into an object of study. And if we refuse? Mr. Huntington, you've done an admirable job helping to dismantle this criminal organization. It would be a shame if irregularities were discovered in the child's adoption paperwork. The threat was clear. Voluntarily hand over Lily for studies, or lose her through legal bureaucracy. When George hung up the phone, he found Valerie and Lily waiting in the room, already knowing that something was terribly wrong. "What is it?" Valerie asked. "We have a new problem," George said, sinking heavily into a chair. And this time, it might be worse than all the others. The news of the governmental threat left the family in a state of absolute shock. Valerie clung to Lily as if someone was about to tear her from her arms at any moment, while George paced nervously around the room, trying to process the magnitude of what they faced. "They can't just take a child for studies," Valerie said, her voice trembling with indignation and fear. "They can, Mom," Lily said calmly, surprising the adults with her acceptance of the situation. "In my dreams, I see men in grey suits who want to put me in a white room with cameras." "What else do you see in those dreams?" George asked, kneeling down to the girl's height. "I see that they don't understand that my gifts don't work when I'm sad or scared. I see that they get frustrated and want to do bad things to force me to do what they want." The simplicity with which Lily described her potential future captivity was more terrifying than any threat they had faced so far. Mr. Finch arrived at the house an hour later, bringing information that confirmed the family's worst fears. "I spoke with contacts in Washington, D.C., he said, taking documents from his briefcase. "There really is a secret government program that studies children with unusual abilities." "What kind of studies?" Valerie asked. "Psychological tests, cognitive experiments, controlled isolation to observe the development of abilities in a sterile environment." "That's monstrous," George murmured. "And legal," the lawyer added somberly, "especially if they can prove that the child represents a national interest superior to individual well-being." Bernice, who had arrived with Mr. Finch, spoke for the first time. "What if we fled the country?" "Where to, and with what documents?" Valerie questioned. "Besides, they already know about Lily. There's nowhere in the world where they can't find us, if they really want to." It was then that Lily made an observation that completely changed everyone's perspective. "Uncle George, what if instead of running from the men in grey suits, we made them not want to study me anymore?" "What do you mean, my flower?" "If they find out that my gifts aren't special, that any child can do what I do, they'll lose interest." George looked at the girl with growing admiration. "You're suggesting we pretend your gifts are normal?" "Not pretend. Show that they're normal even. That I'm just a girl who pays attention to things." Mr. Finch leaned forward, interested. "Explain that better, Lily. When I sense people, I'm actually looking at how they talk, how they move their hands, how they look. When I dream about things that are going to happen, I'm actually putting together pieces of what I've heard the adults say." The silence that followed was one of pure revelation. Lily was systematically deconstructing the perception that she possessed supernatural abilities. "You're saying you don't have special gifts?" Valerie asked, confused. "I do, Mom, but they're not magical. They're like knowing how to read without learning in school, but instead of letters, I read people." George began to understand the genius of the proposal. If we can prove that her abilities are explainable through keen observation and exceptional intelligence, they'll classify her as gifted, not as a paranormal phenomenon, Mr. Finch completed. "And gifted children are protected by educational laws, not subjected to experiments." "But how do we prove that?" Bernice asked. The answer came from Sarah Miller, the journalist who had returned to Harmony Creek to follow the developments in the case. "We document everything," she said, entering the room. "We record Lily explaining exactly how she makes her predictions. We show that they're based on observation and logical deduction." But will it work? Valerie questioned. It has to work, George replied with determination, because it's our only chance. The next 3 days were dedicated to a scientific deconstruction operation of Lily's supposed paranormal gifts. With the help of Sarah and Carlos, they recorded hours of testimony where the girl methodically explained how she reached her conclusions. When I saw that Uncle Peterson was going to try to get me at the hospital, she explained to the camera, it was because I heard him talking on the phone about picking up the merchandise. And since he always called me his merchandise when he was angry, I knew he was talking about me. And when you predicted that the bad men would go to the abandoned house, Sarah asked, because they always chose places where no one would look first. And the old house was the most obvious place to hide someone near the cemetery. Each explanation from Lily revealed an exceptional analytical mind, but a completely human one. There was nothing supernatural in her ability to connect information and predict behaviors. On the 3rd day, they received a visit that would test the new strategy. Dr. Marcelo Vieira, a clinical psychologist sent by the government, arrived to make a preliminary assessment of Lily. Doctor, Vieira will be doing some simple tests, Mr. Finch explained to the family. The important thing is that Lily is herself, but that she also explains her reasoning. The psychologist was a middle-aged man, serious but not intimidating. He set up his work table in George's office and called Lily in for a conversation. Hi, Lily. Can I ask you some questions? Yes, you can. You want to know if I'm special or just smart. Dr. Vieira seemed surprised by the child's frankness. How did you know that? Because whenever adults like you come to talk to me, it's to find out if I'm normal or not. And you have a folder with papers about me. You're nervous, and you keep looking at my mom to see if she's influencing my answers. Very observant. And what else do you notice about me? You don't want to be here. You'd rather be playing with your own children, but your boss said it was important. You think studying children is wrong, but you need the job. Doctor, Vieira looked at Lily with an increasing expression of astonishment. How did you come to those conclusions? You have 2 pictures of children in the wallet you left open on the table. You've looked at them 3 times since you arrived. Your shoes are dirty with sand, so you came from a place that has a playground, and you sigh every time you write something, as if you don't like what you're writing. The psychologist stopped taking notes and looked directly at Lily. You're describing exactly how you came to those conclusions. Of course, it's not magic, it's just paying attention. For the next 2 hours, Dr. Vieira subjected Lily to a series of tests that she passed with ease, but always explaining her reasoning. When he asked her to identify which card he was thinking of, she replied, I can't guess what's in your head, but you touched the red heart card twice, so it must be that one. And was she right? He asked, impressed. She was, but only because I paid attention to what you did, not because I read your mind. When the evaluation ended, Dr. Vieira met with the family to give his preliminary opinion. Lily possesses exceptional intelligence and extraordinary observational skills for her age, he said, but everything I observed can be explained through giftedness and heightened social sensitivity. So there's no need for special studies? George asked. In my professional opinion, no. She would be better served in an educational program for gifted children, not in a laboratory. The relief that washed over the family was immense, but short-lived. That same night, Dr. Vieira called George with disturbing news. My report was rejected by my superiors, he said, his voice laden with frustration. They want a second opinion from someone more amenable to paranormal possibilities. What does that mean? It means they're sending another specialist next week, someone who will probably arrive with predetermined conclusions. When George hung up the phone, he found Lily waiting on the stairs, having obviously overheard the conversation. They're not going to give up, are they? She asked. It doesn't look like they will. Then we have to make them give up another way. How? Lily smiled with a mischievousness that shouldn't exist in a 4-year-old child. By making them think they've lost interest, that they've found something much more important. What could be more important than you? A child with real gifts, a child who can't explain how she does what she does. George looked at her, intrigued and worried at the same time. Lily, what are you planning? Lily's plan was both brilliant and terrifying. Sitting in the room with the family gathered, she explained her idea with the seriousness of a military strategist. If they want to study a child with special gifts, let's give them a child with special gifts, she said, playing with a crayon as she spoke. Only it'll be a lie. What do you mean, a lie? Valerie asked. We're going to pretend there's another child in town who can do things that even I can't do. Things impossible to explain. Then they'll forget about me and go after the other child. George leaned forward. And when they find out this other child doesn't exist, they won't find out if we do it right. And when they do find out, I'll already be far away and safe. Bernice shook her head. That's too risky, Lily. And who's going to pretend to be this special child? Nobody. The child will be invisible. We're just going to leave clues that she exists. Sarah, who had become almost part of the family, began to understand the logic of the proposal. You want to create a phantom child, someone who seems to exist but can never be found. Exactly, like in the movies Uncle George showed me. The plan that emerged from the discussions was complex but possible. They would create evidence of the existence of a 6-year-old child named Laura, who supposedly lived with distant relatives on an isolated farm outside of town. This fictional child would have demonstrated abilities much more impressive than Lily's, predicting earthquakes, communicating with distant people, even influencing electronics. But how are we going to create convincing evidence? Mr. Finch asked. Bernice can forge some basic documents, George suggested. Nothing too detailed, just enough to pique interest. And I can plant stories with some residents of the rural area, Sarah added. People who supposedly witnessed Laura's gifts. The most important thing, Lily said, is that when the new doctor comes to examine me, I'm going to talk about Laura. I'm going to say that I met her, that she does things much more impressive than me. Valerie was still hesitant. What if they discover the hoax? What if this makes our situation worse? Mom, our situation can't get much worse. They already want to take me away. The brutal sincerity of Lily's observation convinced everyone. Over the next 5 days, the operation to create Laura was put into practice. Bernice, using her skills in accounting, forged birth records and a basic school history for the fictitious Laura Mendez, supposedly the daughter of distant cousins of the Sanders family who lived on a rural property 50 miles from town. Sarah and Carlos spread out across the region, talking to farmers and rural workers, planting seeds of a story about a strange girl who predicted when the cattle would get sick, who knew where to find water in periods of drought, and who once had made all the lights in a house flicker just by looking at them. The key is not to exaggerate, Marina instructed the informants she had recruited. Just mention it casually, as if it were local gossip. George took care of creating physical traces of Laura's presence. He bought clothes for a 6-year-old girl in stores in neighboring towns and left them strategically scattered in some locations of the supposed relative's farm. He also created a small, improvised shrine, the kind of thing a child might do, with stones arranged in specific patterns and drawings engraved on trees. Lily, in turn, carefully rehearsed how to talk about Laura during the next evaluation. I have to seem impressed with her, but also a little jealous, she explained, because it's normal for a child to be jealous when another child can do better things. The second specialist arrived on a cold February morning. Dr. Amanda Correa was a 40-year-old woman, with black hair pulled back in a tight bun, and glasses that reflected a cold, calculating intelligence. Unlike Dr. Vieira, she had clearly arrived with predetermined conclusions. Lily Sanders, she said, consulting her notes, 4 years old, demonstrates capabilities of extrasensory perception and possible precognition. Actually, doctor, Lily interrupted politely, my name is Lily Huntington now. Mr. Huntington adopted me. Dr. Correa made a note. I understand. And you continue to have your special episodes? Sometimes. But not like Laura. Laura? Lily feigned hesitation, as if she had said something she shouldn't have. I can't talk about her. My mom told me not to talk about her. Dr. Correa leaned forward, clearly interested. Why can't you talk about Laura? Because she's different, much more different than me. Different how? Lily looked at Valerie, who feigned discomfort. My daughter met a girl in the rural area who demonstrates much more developed abilities. What kind of abilities? Laura can tell when it's going to rain 3 days before, Lily said, her voice full of genuine childlike admiration. And once she made Mr. Peterson's radio work just by touching it, even though it had been broken for months. Dr. Correa took notes quickly. Where can I find this Laura? She lives far from here with her aunts and uncles, Valerie replied. A very private family. They don't like strangers. But could I meet her? Lily shook her head. Laura's aunts and uncles moved her after a lot of people started asking about her. They're afraid someone will want to take her away. The session continued for another 2 hours, but Dr. Correa was visibly more interested in Laura than in Lily. When she tested Lily's abilities, the girl deliberately made some mistakes and rationally explained her successes. Laura can get all these things right, Lily commented when she failed a perception test. She's much more special than me. After Dr. Correa left, the family waited anxiously to see if the plan had worked. The answer came in the form of intense activity in the rural region. Over the following days, government agents scoured farms, interrogated local residents, and desperately searched for traces of the mysterious Laura. They took the bait, reported Marina, who was following the investigations. They've mobilized a team of 12 people to find Laura. And how long until they discover she doesn't exist? George asked. It depends on how desperate they are. They could spend weeks investigating every farm in the region. But the plan had an unexpected consequence. The intense search for Laura aroused the curiosity of the regional press. Soon, journalists from Pittsburgh arrived in town, asking questions about the prodigy child that the government was looking for. This could be good or bad for us, Mr. Finch analyzed. Media attention could protect Lily, but it could also expose our hoax. The situation became even more complicated when Dr. Correa returned 3 days later, visibly frustrated at not having found Laura. I need to talk to Lily again, she said. There are inconsistencies in the information we collected about this Laura. During the second interview, Dr. Correa was much more aggressive in her questioning. Lily, are you sure Laura exists? Of course I do. I played with her. Where exactly? On Mr. Peterson's farm, near Big Creek. We were at Peterson's farm. He said he's never seen any Laura. Lily feigned confusion. But I played with her there. Maybe Mr. Peterson didn't remember. Or maybe you invented Laura. Why would I invent her? Dr. Correa studied Lily for a long moment. To divert our attention from you. George's heart pounded. They had been discovered. But Lily surprised everyone with her response. If I wanted to divert attention, why would I tell you about someone much more special than me? That doesn't make sense. The child's logic left Dr. Correa momentarily speechless. So where is Laura now? I don't know. Her aunts and uncles moved her when they found out important people were looking. They're scared. Scared of what? That someone will want to experiment on her, like they wanted to do with me. The sincerity in Lily's voice was so convincing that even Dr. Correa seemed to believe it. That night, she made a call that would change everything once again. Sir, I recommend that we close the investigations into Lily Sanders. Sorry, Huntington, she said on the phone. She is clearly not our priority target. There is evidence of another child in the region with far superior abilities. When she hung up, Dr. Correa turned to the family. Lily will remain under casual observation, but it will not be necessary to remove her from the family environment at this time. After she left, the family celebrated discreetly. They had managed, at least temporarily, to ward off the governmental threat. "You were brilliant," George said, hugging Lily. "Now we just need to hope that they never find out the truth about Laura," Valerie murmured. "They'll find out," Lily said with certainty. "But until then, we'll be prepared for the next problem." "What next problem?" Lily pointed out the window, where an unknown car was parked down the street, with two men watching the house. "Cesar's friends, who haven't been arrested yet." The discovery of the men watching the house brought back all the tension that the family thought they had left behind. George quickly closed the curtains, while Valerie led Lily away from the windows. "How many are there?" asked Bernice, who had arrived minutes before the discovery. "Two in the car, but there may be more hidden," George replied, peeking through the crack in the curtain. Lily approached the back window and carefully observed the backyard. "There's another man behind the big yellow house on the corner. He's pretending to fix the fence, but he keeps looking over here." "How do you know he's pretending?" Valerie asked. "Because he's using the wrong tools for that type of fence. And because he didn't take off his expensive watch before starting a dirty job." Once again, Lily's observational skills impressed them. But this time, the situation was more serious. They weren't authorities with legal documents. They were criminals who wouldn't answer to laws or negotiations. "We have to get out of here," George said, picking up the phone to call the police. "It won't do any good," said a new voice from the front door. Everyone turned and saw a man of about 50 years old, thin, with a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. He had entered the house silently, probably through a back window that wasn't locked. "How did you get in here?" George asked, positioning himself in front of Lily. "It doesn't matter how I got in. It matters why I'm here." The man pulled up a chair and sat down calmly, as if he were visiting friends. "My name is Rogerio Silva. I was Cesar's partner in some ventures. Cesar is in jail." "Exactly. And because of that, many businesses have been damaged. Businesses that involved a lot of money from very dangerous people." Rogerio looked directly at Lily. "People who blame a very clever child for the destruction of an operation that took years to build." "Lily is just a child," Valerie protested. "A child who identified important people, who provided information that resulted in 17 arrests, who caused losses of millions of dollars." Rogerio smiled coldly. "Not an ordinary child." "What do you want?" "Initially, we wanted to eliminate the problem, but then we learned that the girl has special talents, talents that can be very lucrative in the right hands." George felt his blood run cold. "You want to sell her?" "There are people who would pay fortunes for a child with her abilities, people who have problems that need to be anticipated, businesses that require privileged information." "Never," Valerie said firmly. "I'm not asking for permission." Rogerio signaled, and two other men entered through the front door. "You have a simple choice. Hand over the girl voluntarily and receive generous financial compensation, or we take her by force and you... well, you don't need to worry about anything else in life." It was then that Lily did something that surprised even her own family. Instead of hiding or crying, she walked up to Rogerio and looked him straight in the eye. "You're lying about some things," she said with her clear child's voice. "You don't want to sell me to anyone. You want to use me to find out where Cesar hid the money you stole together." Rogerio recoiled slightly, clearly surprised by the girl's direct perception. "You're desperate because you lost a lot of money when Cesar was arrested," Lily continued. "And now there are people collecting debts that you can't pay." "How do you know that?" "Because you're wearing a very expensive watch but old, worn-out shoes. Your nails are bitten. My mom used to say that nervous people do that." And you have a mark on your finger where you used to wear a wedding ring, but you're not wearing it anymore." Rogerio looked at his own hands, unaware of the clues he had provided. "You sold the ring to pay debts," Lily concluded. "And now you expect me to say where the hidden money is. And do you know where it is?" "No, but I know something better." "What?" "I know the police are arriving here now." As if summoned by Lily's words, the sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, approaching rapidly. Rogerio stood up abruptly. "That's impossible. No one had time to call." "Aunt Bernice called when you were entering through the back window," Lily explained. "She used the kitchen phone while you all were looking at the front door." Bernice nodded discreetly from where she was, near the kitchen, with the phone still in her hand. "Run!" Rogerio shouted to his men, but it was too late. The house was surrounded in a matter of seconds, and the three criminals found themselves with no way out. During the confusion of the arrest, Lily pulled George into a corner. "Uncle George, there's something important I need to tell you." "What is it, my dear?" "When I said I didn't know where Cesar's money was, I lied a little." George looked at her surprised. "You know where it is?" "I don't know exactly where, but I know how to find out. In the papers we found on your desk, there were numbers that looked like coordinates. Numbers that Cesar always repeated when he spoke on the phone. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because if I told you, more people would want to use me to find the money. It's better for people to think I don't know anything." That night, after the last police officers left and the house finally returned to silence, the family gathered in the living room to process everything that had happened. "How many enemies do we still have out there?" Valerie asked. "Few," replied Mr. Finch, who had arrived to follow the legal developments. The arrest of Rogerio and his men dismantled the last remnants of the organization. And what about the government, the search for Laura? Officially, they closed the investigations for lack of evidence. Unofficially, there is still interest, but not urgent. Bernice spoke for the first time since the confusion. "And now, can we finally have a normal life?" "Normal," Lily laughed, a crystal-clear sound that echoed through the house. "Aunt Bernice, our family will never be normal, but it can be happy." "How are you so sure of that?" George asked. "Because for the first time since I can remember, when I close my eyes, I don't see bad people in my dreams. I see our new factory working. I see delicious treats. I see many children playing happily." "What children?" Lily smiled mysteriously. "The children we're going to help when our family gets rich selling the tastiest Appalachian treats." Valerie hugged her daughter. "You're already thinking about helping other people?" "Of course, Mom. After everything we've been through, how can we not think about the other families who may be suffering as we suffered?" George looked at that extraordinary girl who had changed his life completely. "Lily, can I ask you something?" "Yes. Do you really have special gifts, or are you just very intelligent?" Lily thought for a moment, playing with a strand of hair. "Uncle George, does it matter? What matters is that we use what I have, whether it's special or normal, to protect our family and help good people." "You're right. Besides," she added with a mischievous smile, "I still have a lot of time to figure out if I'm really special or just very smart. For now, I want to be just a normal girl who has the best family in the world." That night, for the first time in months, everyone slept soundly. But on the top floor of the house, Lily remained awake a little longer, looking at the stars and whispering softly, "Thank you for sending me such a good family. Now I can stop being afraid." Because although she would never admit it to the adults, Lily knew exactly which of her abilities were special and which were just intelligence. And she knew that finally she was safe enough to be just a child. 6 months passed since the arrest of Rogerio and his accomplices, and Harmony Creek had become the scene of a reconstruction story that inspired the entire region. The new Huntington's maple factory was almost ready, rising on the same land where the old one had been destroyed, but with a modern design that respected the centuries-old traditions of the family. Valerie had become the official master confectioner of the company. Her innovative recipes, combining traditional Appalachian techniques with unique touches that she had developed during the months of difficulty. Her natural talent for confectionery blossomed in a way that surprised even the most experienced confectioners in the region. "I've never seen anyone understand sugar like her," commented Peterson, watching Valerie prepare a new batch of maple cream with cinnamon and pecans. "It's like she was born for this." Lily, now 5 years old, attended the local school where she had become a beloved student by teachers and colleagues. Her exceptional intelligence allowed her to absorb knowledge with impressive ease, but she had learned to modulate her demonstrations of perception so as not to draw unnecessary attention. "Lily is the most polite child I've ever taught," said Mrs. Carmen, her teacher. "And she has a way of resolving conflicts between classmates that impresses me. It's as if she knows exactly what each child is feeling." But not everything was rosy. On the morning of a sunny Tuesday in August, an unexpected event would once again test the stability that the family had achieved. George was in the office of the new factory, reviewing contracts with suppliers, when he received a call that made his blood run cold. "Mr. Huntington," said the formal voice on the other end of the line, "this is the U.S. Attorney's Office. I need to inform you about developments in the case of Owen Sanders." "What kind of developments?" "He's being released. Reduced sentence for exceptional cooperation with justice. He will be released on Friday." George felt the world spin. But does that mean he could try to regain custody of Lily? Legally, yes. Although the adoption is in progress, he still has parental rights that need to be formally extinguished. When George hung up the phone, he sat in silence for several minutes, processing the implications of the news. Owen's release meant a direct threat to Lily's stability, a return to the trauma that she had finally overcome. He arrived home that afternoon, finding Valerie and Lily in the kitchen, testing a new recipe for maple fudge. The domestic scene, mother and daughter laughing while licking spoons covered in sweets, contrasted brutally with the news he brought. "We need to talk," he said to Valerie, signaling with his eyes that Lily shouldn't hear. But the girl, always attentive, immediately noticed the tension in the air. "Did something bad happen, Uncle George?" "Why do you ask that?" "Because you have the same face you had when the bad men were threatening us." George sighed. He had learned that trying to hide things from Lily was useless. She always noticed when something was wrong. "Sit here, my dear. I have some difficult news." When he told her about Owen's imminent release, Lily was silent for a long time. Her expression did not show fear, but a deep sadness that broke the adults' hearts. "Is he going to try to take me away?" she asked finally. "We're not going to let that happen," Valerie promised, hugging her daughter. "But what if the law says I have to go with him?" "Then we're going to change what the law says," George replied with determination. Mr. Finch was summoned for an emergency meeting that same night. The lawyer arrived with a somber expression that did not inspire confidence. "The situation is complex," he said, spreading documents on the living room table. "Owen is claiming that he was coerced into abandoning the family, that his criminal activities were forced by threats, and that now, regenerated, he wants to recover his daughter." "That's absurd," Valerie protested. "He beat me, neglected Lily, used her as a shield in criminal activities." "I know, but he has expensive lawyers now, probably paid for by someone interested in keeping him free. And Lily is a minor without independent legal representation. What can we do? Accelerate the adoption process. If we can finalize it before he's officially released. And if we can't..." Mr. Finch hesitated before answering. "Then we'll have to prove in court that Owen is unfit as a father. And that will mean exposing Lily to interrogations, psychological evaluations, possibly a direct confrontation with him." Lily, who had been listening quietly from the corner of the room, spoke up. "Mr. Finch, can I ask a question?" "Of course, my dear." "If I tell the judge that I don't want to live with Owen, does that count for anything?" It counts, but you're very young. The judge will consider your opinion, but the legal weight is limited. And if I prove he's dangerous, how would you do that? Lily exchanged a meaningful look with Valerie. Mom, it's time to show the things we kept in the secret place. Valerie paled. Lily, you promised we'd never talk about that again. I promised to protect me. But now, I need to protect myself in another way. What things? George asked, intrigued. Before we ran away, Lily explained, I recorded Daddy Owen doing bad things with a little recorder I found in a neighbor's house. What kind of things? Him hitting Mom, him talking about selling drugs, him threatening to hurt me if I told secrets to anyone. The silence that followed was total. Valerie covered her face with her hands, reliving painful memories, while George and Mr. Finch processed the magnitude of the revelation. Where are these recordings? The lawyer asked. Hidden in the house where we used to live, Lily replied, in a place that only I know. But that was over a year ago. How do we know they're still there? Because the place where I hid them is where no one would ever look, and because I dreamed that they're still there, waiting for the right moment to be found. Mr. Finch leaned forward. Lily, do you understand that if these recordings exist and are genuine, they can guarantee that you never have to see Owen again? I understand. That's why I'm telling you now. But do you also understand that this will mean a dangerous trip back to Oklahoma, where people may recognize you? I understand that too. But sometimes we have to do dangerous things to protect the people we love. That night, while secretly planning the trip to Oklahoma, Bernice brought news that further complicated the situation. George, I received a strange call today. Someone asking about the factory, about our family, about Lily specifically. Who was it? Didn't want to identify themselves, but said they had an interest in meeting the special girl who had helped dismantle a criminal organization. George felt a chill down his spine. More people interested in her gifts. Worse, the person mentioned that they knew about our delicate family situation and that they could help with legal issues in exchange for access to the child. Blackmail, Mr. Finch murmured. Owen's release isn't a coincidence, Valerie realized. Someone is orchestrating this whole thing to force Lily out of the legal protection we've built. Lily, who was playing quietly in the corner of the room, raised her head. It's not someone new, she said calmly. It's someone we know who's been here before. How do you know that? Because the voice that Aunt Bernice described. I recognize it. It's the man who called himself a doctor, but wasn't a real doctor. Dr. Correa? George asked, surprised. No, not her. The other one, the one who came before her and said that I should be studied for the good of science. The silence that followed was filled with a terrible understanding. Someone from the government itself had orchestrated Owen's release as a way to pressure the family to hand over Lily voluntarily. They're playing dirty, Mr. Finch said, using the biological father as a legal weapon. Then let's play even dirtier, Lily said, surprising everyone with the determination in her voice. Let's get the recordings that will end Daddy Owen forever, and then we'll find out who's behind all this. Lily, you're just a child. You shouldn't have to deal with this. Uncle George, I stopped being just a child the day I saved you from those men on the road. Now I'm part of this family, and I'm going to protect it as it has protected me. That night, while everyone finally slept, Lily remained awake, looking at the stars. For the first time in months, her dreams had returned. But not dreams of danger. Dreams of a future where her family was safe, where children like her didn't have to be afraid, where good people defeated bad people. Just one more time, she whispered to the stars. Just one more time I need to be brave, and then I can be just a normal girl. But deep down, Lily knew that she would never be a normal girl, and she was beginning to accept that maybe she didn't want to be. The trip back to Oklahoma was planned like a military operation. George drove a rented car with license plates from another state, while Valerie and Lily disguised themselves with simple clothes and differently cut hair. Mr. Finch followed them in another vehicle at a safe distance. "How many hours until we get there?" asked Lily, settled in the back seat with a doll she had received from Bernice for the trip. 6 hours, George replied. "And are you sure you remember where you hid the recordings?" "I'm sure. It's under the loose floorboard in my old room, along with my drawings and some little stones I collected." The house where Valerie and Lily had lived was on the outskirts of Oklahoma City, a simple 2-bedroom construction that was now empty, with a "for rent" sign in front. "It looks abandoned for months," observed Valerie, studying the property from afar. "Better that way. Less chance of being seen," George said. They entered through the back door that Valerie had always left slightly unlocked. The interior of the house smelled of mold and accumulated dust. Furniture covered with old sheets created strange shadows in the light filtered through the dirty windows. Lily ran directly to what had been her room, a small space with a window that overlooked a backyard with a century-old maple tree. She headed for a specific corner and began to poke at the floorboards. "Here," she said, lifting a board that gave way easily. "I knew no one would look here because my bed was on top." From inside the hiding place, she removed a small shoebox lined with fabric. Inside was a simple digital recorder, some childish drawings, and several colorful stones that she collected. "This is the recorder?" Valerie asked, taking the small device. "Yes, it is. I recorded whenever Daddy Owen got angry, because Aunt Bernice once said that when adults do bad things, we need to have proof." George turned on the recorder, and immediately Owen's voice echoed through the empty room, clear and incriminating. "Valerie, if you open your mouth about anything you saw here, I swear you and that girl will disappear off the map." "My God," Valerie murmured, recognizing her own voice responding with fear. "I won't tell anything, Owen. Please don't hurt Lily." The recordings continued for almost an hour. Owen discussing bribe amounts with partners, threatening Valerie with violence, and in a particularly disturbing recording, saying that the girl is getting too smart, and that maybe it was time to get rid of the problem. "Lily, how did you have the courage to record these things?" George asked, impressed and horrified. "Because I knew that one day I would need to prove that he was bad. And because Aunt Bernice taught me that lies disappear, but truths stay forever." When they finished listening to the recordings, Valerie was crying silently. "I never thought it was so bad. Listening like this, it seems even worse." "That's because at the time you were too afraid to realize how terrible it was," Lily said, hugging her mother. "But now we're safe." The return trip was uneventful, but when they arrived in Harmony Creek, they found Bernice waiting for them with a panicked expression. "Owen was here," she said even before they got out of the car. "He arrived last night with 2 lawyers and a court officer. They have a temporary court order that gives him the right to supervised visits with Lily." "How did he get that so fast?" Mr. Finch asked. "The lawyers are from Washington, D.C. Very expensive, very well connected. They claimed that Lily was being kept away from her father by the influence of third parties." "Where is he now?" "At the hotel downtown. He said he'll be back tomorrow to pick up Lily for the first visit." That night, the family gathered to listen to the recordings that Lily had recovered. Mr. Finch took detailed notes while listening to each threat, each discussion about criminal activities, each reference to Owen's violent intentions. "This is pure gold," the lawyer said when he finished. "With this evidence, I can get a permanent protection order." "How long will it take?" "If I file an emergency request early tomorrow, I might get a hearing on Friday. And if Owen wants to take Lily before that, then we'll have to prevent it somehow." Lily, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, stood up. "We're not going to prevent anything. I'm going with him." "What?" everyone exclaimed at the same time. "I'm going with him for the visit, but I'll be prepared." "Lily, it's too dangerous," Valerie protested. "No, Mom, it's dangerous for him, because I'm going to record everything he says, just like I did before. And this time I'm going to ask questions that will make him confess things that even he doesn't know he's confessing. You're just a child. You shouldn't have to do this." "Uncle George, I already explained. I stopped being just a child a long time ago. And now I have the chance to end this forever." The next morning, Owen arrived punctually at 10 o'clock, accompanied by his lawyers and the court officer. He had changed. He was thinner, with grey hair that he didn't have before, and his eyes carried a hardness that Lily remembered well. "My daughter," he said, trying to sound affectionate. "Daddy missed you so much." "I didn't," Lily replied directly, surprising the adults present with her frankness. "Lily will spend 2 hours with me," Owen said to George. "It's my legal right." "And it's her legal right to have a supervised visit," replied Mr. Finch. "The officer present here will ensure that everything occurs within the law." For the next 2 hours, Lily conducted a performance worthy of an experienced actress. She feigned curiosity about Owen's new life, asked innocent questions about his new friends, and gradually led him to talk about future plans that included taking her away from Harmony Creek. "Daddy is planning to move us far away from here," he said, thinking he was being affectionate, "to a place where no one can bother our family. And Mom Valerie and Uncle George, they're not our real family, daughter. Real family is blood of our blood." Everything was being recorded by the small device that Lily had hidden in her doll. When the visit ended, Owen tried to hug Lily, but she dodged politely. "Goodbye, Daddy," she said without showing emotion. 3 days later, at the emergency hearing, the old and new recordings were presented to the judge. The transformation on the magistrate's face as he listened to the evidence was remarkable. "Mr. Owen Sanders," the judge said at the end, "based on the evidence presented, I order the immediate suspension of your parental rights and the granting of a permanent protection order in favor of the minor, Lily." "That's absurd," Owen protested. "I'm her father." "You are a criminal who repeatedly threatened the safety of a child," replied the judge, "and apparently continues to do so." When they left the courtroom, Lily held George and Valerie's hands. "Is it really over now?" she asked. "It's really over now," confirmed Mr. Finch. "And the government man who was helping Daddy Owen?" "Ah, yes. About that." The lawyer smiled. "It seems that the recordings also captured some very interesting phone calls. The FBI is already investigating." That night, for the first time in over a year, Lily slept without worrying about nightmares or threats. Her family was safe. Her legal protection was guaranteed, and she could finally start planning a future where being a special child meant only having a family that loved her unconditionally. A year later, the Huntington's Maple Factory had become the largest producer of handcrafted Appalachian treats in the region. Valerie ran the production with mastery, while George took care of the business. Bernice, completely redeemed, managed the finances with exemplary honesty. Lily, now 6 years old, attended school and helped at the factory on weekends. Her special gifts had revealed themselves to be a combination of exceptional intelligence and heightened sensitivity. Nothing supernatural, but extraordinary nonetheless. "Uncle George," she said one afternoon, watching the machines working, "remember when you asked me if I had real gifts?" "I remember. I found out the answer. My special gift is knowing that I deserve to be loved." The depth of the observation touched George deeply. "And how did you find that out?" "Because before, when I lived in fear, I thought I had to be special to deserve protection. Now I know that every child deserves to be protected just for existing." Valerie approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "And what are we going to do with all this wisdom?" "We're going to use our factory to help other families like ours," Lily said with determination. "Families who need work, children who need safety." "You're already thinking about expanding the business?" George joked. "I'm thinking about expanding our family." 6 months later, the first Lily house was opened in the back of the factory. a shelter for children at risk, funded by the company's profits. It was small, simple, but it worked. "How many children can we help?" asked the first social worker they hired. "All who need it," Lily replied simply. "And how are we going to get resources for that?" "By making the best Appalachian treats," Valerie said. "Treats made with love taste different." At the official opening, the whole town attended. The mayor gave a speech, journalists took photos, and Lily cut the red ribbon with an adorable seriousness. "Why are you so serious?" asked a reporter. "Because it's an important moment. Today we begin to transform our pain into protection for other children." That night, the family gathered on the porch of the house, watching the stars over the Appalachian Mountains, the same porch where months ago they planned escapes and feared for the future. "Any regrets?" George asked Valerie. "Just one. It took me too long to trust that good people really exist." "And you, Lily?" "Regrets?" The girl thought for a moment. "Only that I didn't record more conversations of Daddy Owen," she said, eliciting laughter from everyone. "And now, what are your plans for the future?" "I want to study hard, learn everything about business and help people. And I want to have a lot of siblings, even if they're not blood." "Siblings?" "The children we're going to take care of here. All of them will be my siblings." 2 years later, Lily Sanders Huntington, now officially adopted, was playing in the backyard with 8 children who lived temporarily at the Lily House. She had become a natural older sister, protecting and caring for the younger ones with the same determination she had always demonstrated. "Lily," called George, "I have a surprise for you." She ran into the house and found Valerie holding an official envelope. "What is it?" "A letter from the city hall. They want to create 3 more Lily houses in neighboring towns." Lily's eyes sparkled. "Are we going to accept?" "If you want. After all, it was your idea." Lily looked out the window, seeing the children playing in the backyard, hearing the laughter echoing through the house, smelling the treats being prepared in the kitchen. "I accept, but with one condition." "What?" "That we never forget that it all started with a girl shouting to save a man on the road." George hugged her. "We'll never forget." And so the girl who once lived begging became the founder of a project that would change the lives of hundreds of children. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most difficult moments, and angels arrive disguised as people who most need protection.